These days, supercars are seen as more usable than ever. 2 pedals, adaptive dampers, more ergonomic interiors. It's definitely possible to use them on a daily basis if you want to. And yet, there is still unquestionably one that remains the genuine supermarket supercar. This is the new Porsche 911 Turbo S. But just what makes it the ultimate everyday supercar?
For starters, just look at it. Or rather, don't, because people tend to ignore a 911 Turbo in a way that they wouldn't with another supercar. I know this is in rather sort of fade into the background GT silver, but you put a McLaren or a Lamborghini in this sort of colour and people would look at it just for its, well, sharp lines and sleek looks. This, not so much. Anybody taking any notice? No? Brand new car here. Brand new £170,000 car. Anybody having a look? Nope. Just ignoring it.
Arguably, this generation of Turbo S is even more unobtrusive because there is less differentiation in body size between this and a standard Carrera.
Talking of being unobtrusive, that also extends to the sound. Now, this car has got the optional sports exhaust, which you can tell from the sort of GT2 RS, that's 991 GT2 RS exhausts at the back, the big oval ones. I'm not sure I'd actually spec the sports exhaust on a 911 Turbo because, as I say, you don't really want to be shouty. In fairness, this isn't particularly shouty anyway. We'll get onto the sound perhaps later because it's changed a little bit, I think, from turbos of old. But in general terms, the 911 Turbo slips quietly through life, if you wanted to. As well as being a little bit shy and retiring on the outside, it's also wonderfully friendly on the inside. I mean, the seating position. In the 992 you can slam the seat really, really low, but it can also be much more upright. This windscreen, it's not really got a huge amount of rake on it, even these days. So it feels very manageable, really. Then there's the actual physical size of this car. At 1900 millimeters wide, this is, well, it's 2 centimeters wider than the old 991 Turbo, but it's not actually that wide compared to its competitors. Things like the 488 are wider, you might expect that. How about Aston Martin Vantage? That's still 5 centimeters wider than this. Jaguar F-Type, similar amount.
I haven't even mentioned the fact that this has the not inconsiderable practicality of 4 seats. A quick shout out too to the agave green leather of this particular car, which I rather like.
Stop start. Pulls away smoothly and easily. It's not intimidating, it's not shouty, it's not aggressive if you don't want it to be. The steering, as soon as you get in, it's actually still quite slow. It's not twitchy and hyperactive. So the 911 Turbo S is, well, it's practically as usable as a hot hatch around town, but it has got 641 brake horsepower. You can't use that in town, so we better head out onto the open road. And then we're released. That's it, actually. That's 60. And that is slightly the trouble with a turbo, is that it is so fast that the opportunities to actually enjoy all its performance are vanishingly small on the road. And yet there's still something really, well, appealing about the turbo. And the only way I can really describe it is it's a bit like, I imagine, being a superhero walking amongst mortals. You've got so much abundance of performance, both in terms of acceleration, cornering grip and stopping grip, because this has got 10 piston calipers on its carbon ceramic brakes, which are standard up the front, smaller pistons at the back, but it has so much performance that anything you want to do, you want an overtake, it's done incredibly quickly. Through a roundabout, gone. It feels, well, almost incredibly safe. It's like this is the safest car imaginable because it can do anything you want and more.
It is the sheer accessibility of the performance that makes it feel faster even than something like a McLaren 720S, which has more power and less weight. The response from the new 8-speed PDK gearbox, combined with the turbo's tenacious traction, means you can dip into its 590 pounds-foot not only rapidly but without any fear of whether it will all deploy smoothly to the tarmac. There is simply no histrionics.
Something I'm really not sure about with this car is the ride quality. So this has the optional sports suspension, which is a 10mm drop in ride height. And to be honest, I just don't think it needs it. I obviously haven't driven the standard setup, but I think any more compliance would be very welcome, certainly in its brief as an everyday usable supercar. In fact, this sort of edginess is something that I noticed really came in with the second generation 997, and I'm sure it was a response to the Nissan GT-R. Suddenly there was this car that was really super aggressive and everybody put it up against the 911 Turbo, and almost to combat that, I think Porsche decided to go more hardcore. And I think that's a shame really, because although this, you get up to speed, it does breathe with the road better, but it's still, it just needs a little bit more travel, I think. One thing that I think has actually improved slightly is road noise. It's not brilliant. I mean, you've got 315 section tyres out the rear, and 911s, particularly turbos with their big rear tyres, have always suffered from road noise. But I actually think this generation is better than certainly previous ones that I've experienced.
So, definitely usable then. And you can be the undisputed king of the road without breaking a sweat, which is enjoyable. But the truth is that because you don't have the feedback or soundtrack of something like a GT3, because it is so usable and unflappable and unruffled at everyday speeds, you'll feel like you're barely scratching the surface of this supercar if you don't live near an autobahn or on the Isle of Man.
It's kind of hard to conceive of a situation where you'd go beyond Sport to Sport Plus. Unless that is, you've got a track available. The new Turbo S and Castle Combe is quite a combination. Fast circuit and an incredibly fast car. And after being in lockdown for weeks and weeks, this is quite the eye-opener. Obviously I'm now in Sport Plus mode, and what's really interesting actually is that I've got PDCC here, and just fiddling around with that is quite a vivid demonstration of how much that is helping the car actually.
PDCC stands for Porsche Dynamic Chassis Control, and it's an active anti-roll system. It's standard on the Turbo S along with rear axle steering.
Turn it back on again, and suddenly the whole car tautens up. You get much better turning, and the car is really flat through the corners. It's quite incredible. Castle Combe is quite a bumpy circuit in places. This is coming into Quarry, so it's folly through there, and you can certainly feel the mass of the car. You can feel it on the road too when you started pushing on. But through here, this weighs 1640 kilos unladen, and you certainly notice it. It cannot disguise all that mass entirely. Having said that, it does do an awfully good job of accelerating it between the corners. My word. What's also interesting is that this new 3.8 litre engine, it's got a much nicer sounding top end than before. Before you also used to get that sort of gas rush sound. You still get a little bit of that, but at between 6,000 and 7,000 RPM, there's a much more obvious crescendo to it. In the past, it was very easy to run into the limiter because it would just seem to be one monotonous sound. Now, well, it sounds more like a 911 really. It's a bit like a detuned version of the GT2 RS.
Of course, this Turbo S actually has 37 pounds-foot of torque more than a GT2 RS, and although it also weighs around 200 kilos more, it also has all-wheel drive, so Porsche claims it will do 0 to 62 miles an hour in just 2.7 seconds, making it the fastest accelerating series production 911 ever. But what does that sort of acceleration actually look like?
Now, I've got a demonstration for you because numbers, bald numbers, seeing me lean back in the seat can only say so much. So, here we have a BMW M1 35i, 300-ish brake horsepower, 0 to 62 in about 4.8 seconds. So not a slow hot hatch, quick in fact. Let's see how it gets on against the might of the Turbo S.
3, 2, 1, go!
Oh my, 100. Oh my word. That was... that was so much more of a gap than I expected. You will not get more of a vivid demonstration than that, I think, of just the sheer acceleration of a Turbo S. I'm genuinely blown away by that. I thought it would be, you know, a decent gap. I didn't think it would be that. I didn't get the best start. I think he got away slightly ahead of me and then it was just gone. Wow.
Of course, it's not just the straight line acceleration that's impressive.
It's the grip through the corners. Over the minute, it is actually nicely controllable if you can manage the weight. You have to look after the tyres because they can get hot pretty quickly, as you'd imagine.
Shuffling all that power around is PTM, or Porsche Traction Management, or just all-wheel drive, which can now send up to 369 pounds-foot of torque, or 62% of the total available, to the front axle. At the back is an electronically controlled limited slip diff, which vectors torque between the rear wheels, as I shall now demonstrate. Sort of.
Wow, this is fast. You can feel over the bumps there. That's 130 miles an hour into this final corner. And let's try and get a good run out of here. Deep breath through here, actually use the aero. That'll be 150 miles an hour into there. You're being really brave. It's extraordinary that this car is so usable, and yet it can also do this.
From shopping to start-finish straight, the Turbo S remains the supermarket supercar beyond compare. Its breadth of ability is deeply, deeply impressive. However, after driving it for several days, I couldn't help wondering if a Carrera 4S wouldn't be just as enjoyable, certainly on the road, while saving you 75 kilos and a whole heap of money. Go back to the 997 generation and there was clear water between the C4S and the Turbo in terms of both philosophy and performance. Now, not so much. Like for like, 0 to 62 in 3.4 versus 2.7 really doesn't represent such a huge gulf. Then again, some will always want the car that speaks softly while carrying not just a big stick, but the biggest stick. For them, only the Turbo S will do.